Hello, welcome to a episode of Quartertones. My name is Mikey Mhenna. Today with us on the series is Kareem Roustom, who is an Emmy-nominated composer who's composed music across many genres and worked with an enormous number of highly acclaimed artists and musicians. It is an honor to welcome Kareem to the series. Kareem, welcome.
Mikey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm curious, what is the path towards composer? How does one become a composer? Like usually, like, let me tell you what I think it is a path and why. I'd love to know why I'm wrong. Usually it's like you're in a band in high school and people say, do you play covers or do you compose your own music? Right? That's sort of like the path, the only path I know that doesn't involve like white wigs and,
Well, yeah, that's true. Most composers are dead, but there are quite a lot of us who are still around. I mean, I think that if you flip the question around, is how many different types of composers are there, right? And there are so many ways you might think of a singer-songwriter, right? Somebody who's just writing songs, could be pop, could be, any number of genres. And that's a really specialized skill set, in a way. It's a lifetime of loving and listening and studying great songs of all kinds, whatever the style, whatever the language, that's a discipline unto itself. These days, there are a lot of composers who compose for video games, right? And that's become a really, really big genre or field, that people pursue. And people come at that from many different angles, right? So when we think about the white wigs and Beethovens and Mozarts and, this type of a thing, there was never like one set path, right? People think composer, they think classical music, Western classical music. But I mean, there were composers who wrote songs for Kulthum, Mulahhin, Mu'allif, Riyad al-Sanbati, al-Qasabji, wonderful, wonderful music. And it's still the same creative, almost collaborative process. Some people might think of the path like you learn an instrument, you fall in love, you begin to improvise. I think that's really the essence of when a composer starts, is when you start improvising. And in the Western classical genre, that's much less of a thing. It used to be a thing. But I mean, in traditional Arabic music, that's a really big part of that music, and I think for anybody who has a jazz background, that's a really huge part. And there are lots of other traditions in which improvisation is a big part. But that's the first step. Where you go from there can really, really vary, I mean, some people might do the whole conservatory thing and pursue that. That's a direction. But it doesn't always have to be that way.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question for you. You're based in the States. You have roots in the region, in the Arab world, very strong roots. And your music is clearly rooted in both contexts. I feel like finds itself at home in both contexts. Here is a question for you. When in the last 100 years do you think classical Arabic music has been its most popular outside the Arab world?
Outside. Well, it depends how you define classical Arabic music, right? Every country has its folk traditions, right? And every country has its more, kind of complex traditions, right? If you think about Morocco, right? When they play the Gharnati, that is this oldest still performed music in the world, right? It really does go back, however long, into the times of Al-Andalus,
Really? Wow. I had no idea.
Yes, absolutely. So when they left, when they were pushed out, they came to North Africa and they brought that music with them. But that repertoire is, as far as we know, but it's still continued throughout that time. So for that tradition, that's their classical music in a way. But I think the other thing about classical, which we have to, especially when it comes to music of the Arab world, is the text, the language, right? You have al-Fusha and you have the local dialects, right? And so when somebody's singing in classical Arabic, they're singing in classical poetry, that may be one way to define it as classical music in a way. So it's really, really connected to the poetry. I think, when it probably in the 90s, it's probably really started to spread when the whole notion of, world music came up in the West, right? And you could go into a Starbucks or whatever, and they would be playing, a kora player from Africa, or you could buy these CDs, and record labels like Putamayo, and that started to really distribute to the West music from non-Western countries. As far as Arabic music, I mean, I think to spread beyond, you really, really have to go to the icons, I mean, Fairuz, I think, has crossed over into Arab genres, people who have only heard of Fairuz, that's their version, of Arabic music, or Kulthum,
Yeah.
And so documentaries that were made, but you also, there was a film, and I think film is a way in which the music can spread as well. And there was this film, and Goodbye Lenin, actually, about the fall of the Berlin Wall. And there was I don't know why, but there was a piece of music by Abdul Wahab, an instrumental piece of music that was in there. And, so I think that's another way in which it kind of can sneak in and make itself felt in a way.
Mm. Okay. The reason why I asked that question is because maybe it's related to the work that I'm doing now, but it feels like we're in this moment where classical sounds, or sounds that sound like classical music, not sort of contemporary pop music, that come from the Arab world, seem to be, there seems to be a broader taste for those sounds in Europe and in the Americas. And I'm wondering if that's my imagination, or if we're peaking right now.
I don't know. I mean, I think it's hard to say if we're peaking. I mean, it works the other way too, right? I mean, really, the kind of modernizer of Arabic music was Sayyid Darwish, the Egyptian singer, composer. We forget, like, the Cairo Opera House, the first premiere of Verdi's Aida took place there, and that was kind of, I think, inaugurated the opera house. And Sayyid Darwish was alive at that time, and he used to say, "I am the Verdi of Egypt." You know what I mean? So that he was, like, way into that. And you look at his old manuscripts, have these books and these handwritten things, and he's using Italian words to name the instruments, right? He was writing operettas, like, just to even use that. At the same time, Sayyid Darwish also wrote these amazing washahat and adwar and ta'ati, all of these different song genres, but was also kind of politically active, right? And like this song Salma Ya Salama, he would sing about the standing on the dock, waving to the ship as those Egyptians who have decided to leave are there, and he's saying Salma Ya Salama, Truhu bis Salama, and he's singing Ma fi ahsan min baladi. Right. And at one point in English, they all sing, "We are very good," And so it's kind of like this globalism, this awareness, and all tied into sort of this post-World War I of trying to push off the British. So it's, you go back and you look at the moment of Sayyid Darwish's music and everything that surrounded that, and it's amazing. And it led to some incredible music. And everybody who came after him, Abdul Wahab, Al-Qasabji, Sambati, all of the Zakaria Ahmad, they all kind of said, yeah, Sayyid Darwish was the one who kind of opened the door for us to see other abilities.
I don't know what's more amazing, the fact that he said that he is the Verdi of Egypt, or that he didn't say Verdi is the Sayyid Darwish of Italy.
Well, Maybe it's hard to say. He died quite young, only in his early 30s.
Yeah.
But in the last 7 years of his life, he composed so much music, and so much of it they still, sung and performed and loved. And oftentimes people don't know that, oh, that's Sayyid Darwish song.
Do you think when you think back to that music, so using an American reference to put things in that context for a second, so using like the music of like Cole Porter or George and Ira Gershwin, a lot of times people will like deconstruct George Gershwin's music and they'll be like, oh, it still sounds very contemporary in some interesting ways. Do you feel like, say, Darwish had similar things going on where you can look at the composition and say like, oh my God, we're still discovering these gems?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that there's still a lot of music that's not performed anymore. Probably the operettas are not performed, and I don't know them, how you can find them, and just kind of dive into them, but I think it's different. It's really different because whenever you talk about American music, you're talking about music of immigrants. Everybody's an immigrant who comes here, unless you are indigenous, everybody's an immigrant. Whereas Darwish, that was his land, his home. And so there's a kind of a longer tradition, a longer line that goes back. And immediately for him, it was the Ottoman influence of that music as well. So I think trying to sort of place the two, to me, it's quite different. But I think they're probably, it's not a question, and we'll come back into this, not so much a question of like, are there more hidden gems, but it's like, how else can we interpret this music?
Yeah.
What else does my experience in life allow me to see in this music, versus somebody else who will come and say, oh, I'm going to interpret it, completely differently. And I think music that invites different interpretations is a sign of, I don't want to say greatness, but of deep, deep richness and something that we should value. And I think that exists in, say, Darwish music.
Cool. Okay, I want to, since this is Quartertones, we like to listen to some interludes from music that we've pre-selected. You were kind enough to send over some things that you thought might lead to great discussions, and they are from your forthcoming chamber music album, Reimagining Folk Music from the Near East. So let's pull some of that stuff up. So the first track that we're going to listen to is As She Leaves Her Father's Home.
Yeah, Buhur, yeah.
Me. So let's listen to the original, which is Sabah Fakhri. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this before we listen to it.
Sure, yeah. So for those who don't know Sabah Fakhri, he's one of the wonders of the world, but he was a tenor from Aleppo. He passed away only a few years ago, but he had a prodigious kind of memorized body of music. The amount of music this man knew is just incredible. But the Tala'a min Bayt Abuha is part of a genre called Qudud, which is specific to the city of Aleppo. And they're short songs, chorus, verse, that type of a thing, with lots of lyrics that can be added to them. And Tala'a min Bayt Abuha, it's basically, the person from this person's point of view sees this young woman going to the neighbor's house, just heading out. And she's wearing, I think white and green, as he says it, and he's clearly smitten with her, and he says, let me see your eyes, and she says, my eyes are like the eyes of gazelles. Get out of here, you pathetic guy, and so there's kind of this little kind of back and forth. And it's I suppose a little kind of story of unrequited love, or
we've all been there. We've all been
there. So we can listen to some last.
All right, here we go. This is off YouTube if you want to go find it as well. Okay, I'm going to stop it here. The real question, Kareem, before we get going and listen to your version, it's going to be hard to bring in to sort of capture the finger pointing.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
any remix, you need to have the finger pointing. It's going to be very, very hard.
But, yeah. No, that's it's hard because my version is for string quartet and they're busy playing. So yeah, the finger pointing is hard. Yeah, Sabah was a showman, and
for sure.
Yeah. So I'll share some funny stories that I heard about him a little later. So this is for string quartet, and the way I approached kind of interpreting this, and we can talk about this a little more, is really kind of a young man who sees this girl and is just like completely smitten with her, right? And so his heart is beating, right? And you hear that in the tremolo and the string quartet, but you hear the same melody. But yeah, let's have a listen.
And I misspoke earlier for those listening. This is off an album called Syrian Folk Songs, Book 1 for string quartet.
Well, I'll mention the name of the album shortly, but we can have a listen.
Amazing. Really beautiful.
Thank you.
I'm curious, how do you, before you tell us about a little more about it, I'm curious, how do you approach something like this? Because it is a real reimagination of it.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, I know this music, right? I used to perform it quite a lot, with different groups in a very traditional sense. So I think it really helps to have connection to it. Part of it is really kind of thinking about the lyrics a little bit, right? Right? It kind of has this silly back and forth, very light. But what if you kind of took it a little bit more seriously, And then maybe, like, I try to remember when I was a young boy in Damascus and in school, and I had a crush on one of my classmates, Maria, oh Maria. So, you try to remember that and then kind of bring that life experience into it, right? I mean, like as a skilled composer, like you have a melody, you have rhythm, and then you add harmony to it. There are just kind of like very standard ways of doing that. But I think to reapproach this, right? And if another composer came and looked at the same song and might probably do something completely different because his or her life experience was completely different. I think that's what it takes, is just to really bring your life experience into the process.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question about the popularity of this music. So, you alluded to this idea that Sabah Fakhri is sort of this giant, and his music is known the Arab world over, if not globally. And this is one of these, like, falls into a genre of music that people just know the lyrics. These are standards, so to speak. But you also said that this music is really from and of Aleppo, and it's a genre that's really like kind of localized. Not kind of, it is localized. So my question is, did the regional popularity of this music, was it really only made possible with the advent of like records and radio, or did this travel with lots of different music?
I think this genre specifically spread in popularity, yes, because of recording, but also television, right? But it specifically because of Sabah Fakhri. So he came, he said, "Ana jaddadtaha al-musiqa," and he said, "I renewed this music." And yeah, it's true. He took these old songs, gave them new arrangements, worked with the ensemble to sort of bring them to be something more contemporary. But don't forget, like if you look back in the 1960s and early 70s, he would show up as a guest performer on television shows, right?
Yeah.
All of these comedy series with Quartertones and Dored Laham, the actor, and so they'd be in a coffee house and and now we have, Sabah Fakhri's coming to sing. So television was a way in which, he spread that, because these programs also traveled to different parts of the Arab world. But then he began traveling and touring, so Sabah was really responsible, I think, in many ways, and maybe I'm not giving enough credit to others, but to sort of bringing this genre, and I suppose he was the first kind of superstar of this kind of music, but he also sang Egyptian music. But he also, like these melodies, these hudud would be, some of them are by Sayyid Darwish, or he would sing Adwar or Muwashahat. And so it was mixed, it was kind of localized, but it's not really localized, it also came from other places. But I think the popularity was really his doing.
Amazing. Okay, I want to move on to the second one, which you sent over as well, and you sent over the translation is "Blessed are your wedding garments," but Mubarak basically.
Yeah, well, it's Mubarak al-Malbus, right? So this, yeah, and this is I first heard this melody on Zagharid, which is by a Palestinian traditional folklore group called Al-Funun, and it's a wonderful album from the mid-90s, really wonderful traditional songs, again reimagined, renewed, right? And so the song itself is, as we now call it, Palestinian, right? So the collection that I put together is called Syrian folk songs. And when I'm thinking about Syria, I'm thinking about Surya al-Kubra, right? Historical Greater Syria, right?
Yeah.
And so all of these regions were there. And in a way, kind of playing with this idea that borders are artificial and silly, and our identities change over time. But it's such a beautiful melody, Mubarak al-Malbus, that it's one of many melodies that are sung during weddings. And what's described here is the groom is basically getting dressed, and every garment of clothing somebody in his family gives it to him. Mubarak Basayunak al arus. We know that you're looking at your bride and you're in love, but every piece of clothing as he's getting ready is blessed, and by way of blessing the marriage. But if you hear the original, then you get a sense of that.
Okay, let's play. This is the original, and by original, as performed by the group that you just mentioned.
Yeah, Al-Funun, yeah.
مبارك الملبوس والبس ويا محمد مبارك الملبوس وعينك على العروس ثمك حاجيني وعينك على العروس مبارك العكال والبس ويا محمد مبارك العكال الجوكيت والبس ويا محمد مبارك الجوكيت وعينك عالجرجيت ثمك حاجيني وعينك عالجرجيت.
I'm curious, before we listen to your interpretation of this, when you say original, tell me what original means.
It's a problematic word because we assume that something is in a unchanging state, and that it came to be perfect, but that's never the case. So in my case, it's the oldest version that I can find, and there are probably earlier ones. There are probably ones that certain villages sing with different dialects, and so that's what it means as far as I'm concerned. But what really struck me about this were the lyrics, right? This young man, this groom getting dressed in front of his family, every item of clothing, they're indoors, so it felt very intimate and very quiet, right? And it's this thing, you almost feel like these layers are coming on him, right? One layer at a time until he's fully dressed. And so that's how I decided to treat this this version of it. And it begins just with a violin, and then the second violin comes, and then it just kind of adds and adds, but it doesn't get huge. It just kind of becomes warmer and warmer.
Yeah. Have you found any of the sort of quote unquote original versions that have instrumentation as well?
No, nothing like this as far as I know.
Okay, cool. I'm excited to listen to it. Can you tell me how it feels to make this type of music for you? Is it a intellectual exercise? Is it an emotional exercise? Is it a commercial exercise? Is it one that has a specific goal in mind?
Mm. Is it a commercial exercise? Definitely not. No. So, but it is all those other things. It is emotional, right? When I'm looking for these melodies, like I fall in love with them. Like I love this melody. I love everything about it, right? And so, part of it is like, I research, I look, what do these lyrics mean? If there's something in these dialects that I don't know, then I have to find out. And then once I kind of have immersed myself in the context of the music, then I kind of begin to reimagine it. Again, I can only reimagine it through the way my life has unfolded so far. But the goal is, right, is to create something in this repertoire for performers on classical instruments from the Arab world, right? For them to say, this is mine. Right? For them to have a place that they can present this, and hopefully this is something done at a really high level, that they can play this with Beethoven and Mozart and Bartok and whoever else, and it becomes something that gives voice to us in a region that we don't have voice. So that's my goal for this. And with the whole Syrian folk song series, the reason I named it Book 1 is because I hope to have Book 2, Book 3, Book 4, maybe, I don't know, beyond that. It'll take some time, but I'm looking really closely at folk traditions that I don't know very well and trying to understand them. And then to give them a place, in this repertoire. I know young performers, and I'm meeting more and more from the Arab world who are coming to study either here in the US or London, or certainly in Berlin, where I just was and met a number of Palestinian musicians. When they recognize something, I can't tell you how exciting it is for them, right? That they feel, yes, we're practicing all of this Western canon stuff, but wait a minute, there's this too. We can play this, right? And so that's the real goal behind this. These pieces are not commissioned by anyone. I make my living off of commissions. Orchestras hire me to write pieces, but I'm doing this as a way to sort of connect with this younger generation and to give them something to play.
Yeah. Earlier, speaking of commissions, you and I were talking the first time we spoke to plan for this interview about this piece for clarinet that you were thinking about putting together, that sort of kind of lost steam. And it's a very touching story, really, really almost heartbreaking story. And it made me, one, I'd love for you to share the story, but also to think about how you choose what projects you want to work on, and when do you just push through to completion, and when do you just say, all right, khalas, this, مش وقته, it's not coming out.
Right. Well, طيب. So the piece that you talked about, that you mentioned just now, and I'll tell the story, is a piece that is now called Palestinian Songs and Dances. And I know for a fact there's nothing like that in the classical repertoire. There's zero representation of that culture and that tradition. So what started is a year ago, this spring, a year in 2023, a music camp in New England, where I have friends and connections contacted me, and they said, look, we have this, and they often bring people from the Middle East. We have this young 15-year-old clarinetist coming from Ramallah. Do you have anything for intermediate clarinet and maybe string quartet or something like that? I said, I don't, but I'd be happy to do it. And so that's when I started looking into traditional Palestinian folk music more seriously. And so I wrote these two pieces that he could play, one of which was this melody that we just heard, actually, and I have a version of that for clarinet. So unfortunately, after his family paid all kinds of money, after the camp paid all kinds of money, the U.S. decided to deny his visa, which is, just ridiculous. Like, he's coming to study music. He's 15, So I put the piece aside. After October 7th and after everything that's unfolded after that, people started reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, is this piece done?" Because I put it on my website, and I'll just say work in progress if it's, I can't work on it because I have to work commissioned work. So I said, I really need to finish this. So I did. And we actually just gave the world premiere at a concert in Berlin on April, I want to say 5th, right? This last Friday.
Amazing.
At a fundraiser, which we were able to raise, I don't know, but close to 4,000 euros that went to Palestinian Children's Relief Fund. And I think there was a real hunger. A lot of people came. The history in Berlin, as you understand, is very complicated with this issue. The police showed up, actually.
The police showed up?
Yep, made sure that we were not inciting violence.
Nice. It's like Stravinsky's Red of Spring.
Almost, yeah. But they were polite and chill, and whatever we spoke to them, and they just had a look and left. But there were some really incredible musicians, like some very, recognizable names in the classical music world, who came to play for free to help raise money.
Wow.
And so my piece was played at the very end. There were at least 2 or 3 young Palestinian musicians who are studying in Berlin, as well as others who contributed, who are based in Berlin, German or otherwise. And so that's the goal of this piece, right? Is one, just to raise anybody who has a benefit concert. It's there, it's available. I have to figure out the logistics, but I basically want to make the sheet music available for free. And anybody who's doing a fundraising concert can get it and can use it, because there's no voice for Palestinian culture and tradition, or there's very little. I don't want to say there's no voice, but there's very little in a kind of piece that's, middle of the road, mainstream, fairly, communicative to everybody. And I wanted to do that. But I also hope to encourage Palestinian composers to do more things like this, right? Because I think it's just really vital for them to have their voice heard, So that may mean leaving a little bit of tradition behind, right? It may mean kind of stepping into a genre they're not super comfortable with. But I think it's outreach, So for me, this is a way of just kind of reaching out, changing perceptions, but also just to sort of show the humanity that we all share.
Yeah. It's it's very corny, but music does serve as this universal language, and allows people to see each other and hear each other in ways that is impossible using many other mediums.
Right. I think so. I think it does have that power. It's true. So that's really kind of the impetus behind it, behind the Syrian folk songs, behind the Palestinian songs and dances.
Yeah.
And so hopefully over time, people are interested, and they are reaching out to me saying, we would love to do this, we'll see what happens.
Over the last 6 months after October 7, a lot of corners of the broader art world, like capital A art world and academia, have sort of revealed themselves as being sort of endowed with the stench of bigotry. And we've seen literature festivals, blackball people, art festivals, and all these different spaces that you thought, okay, these people are cultured. These people are, they care about self-expression, and maybe they don't all agree, but clearly they care about something as expressive as art that will for sure not shut people out and shut people down and gag them. As you were talking and you mentioned all these well-known figures from the classical world showing up to support you, it made me curious, does the classical music world also suffer from the same sense of sort of bigotry where there is this, you feel like you can't, it's risky to publish a book of songs called Palestinian folk and dance music?
We'll find out. Yes, it's, of course, it's there. It's everywhere. You know what I mean? It exists for sure, but it's different in every country, right? Just because I just came back from Germany, from Berlin, and speaking and listening to a lot of people there, their history, as you understand, very complicated, right? And so institutions are afraid of losing government funding by speaking out, by bringing in guests who who are outspoken. But it's, you go to a different country and it's a different situation, right? When I spoke at this concert, I spoke about the importance of understanding that humanity is bonded, right? If I recognize your humanity and I affirm it, then I'm doing the same for mine, but the opposite is also true, and so that's all I want to get across. My goals are very humble and simple in that sense, with music. And I think, but I think what you describe exists. I've seen it, I've experienced it firsthand, and you just have to have a tough skin, but also you have to put out the highest quality music that you can. Right. So when a conductor comes to play it, when a performer comes to play it, they like, okay, this guy's not kidding around. Right. This is for real.
Yeah.
So maybe this is an example of a piece like that. Now we're going into a completely different style. Bring up Strange Sea.
Yeah. So for those listening right now, I pulled up a song. I pulled up an excerpt from a piece called Strange Sea. That's SEA for orchestra. This is also on SoundCloud. So let's play a little bit of it, and then I'd love to hear you tell us a little more.
Sure.
Well, before we get started, tell us what we're about to listen to, maybe.
Yeah. So this is an excerpt. Let's listen to maybe about just like 3 minutes. I think that's more than enough. You get a sense. This piece was commissioned by a wonderful conductor named Robert Trevino and the Malmö Symphony in Sweden, right? And as Malmö is a city that has a long history of accepting refugees, specifically from different parts of the world. The inspiration comes from two poems, one by a Swedish poet and one by a Syrian Palestinian. Now he's also a Swedish poet as well, named Rayat al-Madhoun, and I can read those afterwards.
Yeah.
But they each talk in different ways about taking a very difficult journey on the sea, right? And so what I wanted to paint was just like this kind of violent, kind of not uncaring, but this sea that just exists, whether we're there or not, right? And that this is a moment where we crash through the waves, and you can just kind of get a feeling for that in this excerpt.
Okay, can't wait. Let's press play. Amazing. Okay, so I have a question for you, Kareem. Let's
Sure.
say I played this clip to somebody and I said, "Thank you for listening. This is another excerpt of Arabic music." Would you be like, "Mikey, what the hell are you talking about? This is not Arabic music." Within the context of afikra, would you say,
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, okay, look, when I was in Damascus a long time ago, in 2008, I had a piece played, right? I had a piece performed, and there were several composers. Kinan al-Admi, the wonderful Syrian clarinetist, was there. He had commissioned new pieces for chamber group, and we did a press conference, and there was a reporter. She asked the question. She said, "Okay, this group doesn't have oud in it, because it was clarinet, violin, viola, cello, and piano, and it was Rami Khalife playing piano, Marcel's son." And she said, this group doesn't have oud in it. How can you call it Arabic music? طيب, okay, Kulthum, if you look at the videos of her performances after Al-Qasabji died, right? He was her oud player, also her composer for many years. But after he died, there's an empty chair behind her, right? For many years, she grieved and left that chair empty, right? So the oud wasn't there, you know what I mean? But the spirit of the oud was there, right? So that's a little bit of an evasive answer, but I think this particular piece is not Arabic music. In a way, it is part of my experience, which is, at first you said I am at home and either here or there, but the truth is I am not at home either here and there. You know what I mean? And that is what happens when you kind of have to move or emigrate at a certain age, right? Or if you're born to an American parent and a Syrian parent as well, and there's always this kind of shift. So to me, this was written for a specific conductor, a specific orchestra, and he was looking for a kind of piece that just had this intensity. And if we read Ghayath al-Madhoun's poem,
yes,
right,
please,
which you can say this is not Arabic poetry, but this is an English translation by Catherine Cobham, right? And the poem, this is an excerpt, is called "The Poet Can Turn into a Wolf." And it reads, "And I could not have left Damascus that autumn evening in 2008, which would mean we never actually met. And I would never be able to tell you that you seem closer when I talk to you about Damascus, or whenever I talk to Damascus about you. For the bodies that we see in the mirror appear closer than they really are, and those that carry our souls have been eaten by a predator called the Mediterranean Sea." Right? So what's he talking about there? And I asked him, "Ghayath, what are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm talking about all my friends who fled and drowned, right, in the Mediterranean and couldn't make it, right?" And he began to imagine the Mediterranean as this predator, right, that's coming after these helpless people, right? So in a way, he's a poet who has embraced modernism and has embraced these other ways of writing poetry. Why shouldn't I be allowed to, or somebody else, right? Or why shouldn't somebody be allowed to come and bring hip hop in, or jazz or that kind of a thing? So, is it pure Arabic music? Of course not, right? And there are some times, and this something that you brought up, is like where I feel that I sense a possibility of bigotry, right? People make all these assumptions about me because of my name and where I was born, right? And so I channel a different musical language that can just come to them, right? Whereas, as we heard in the Syrian folk songs and that sort of a thing, that's a completely different language as well, and there are other things that, technically I can do. But I think you have to, a piece like this, you have to kind of read the poem and understand what behind it.
I love it. And I think that's the best answer I've heard to this question, I have to say.
It's a good question, and it's a hard one to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I want to listen to the last one, which is Buhur. And I'm going to pull that up as well. Tell us a little bit about this.
Okay, so in a way, this is the oldest thing that of mine that you've heard, so Buhur, this was a recording made in Damascus in 2008, actually, funnily enough, reading about Khayyaf's poem. And that's sadly the last time I was there. And this was a project Kinan Al-Admi, the clarinetist, had commissioned several composers, myself, Zay Jabri, Shafi, I'm forgetting his name, but it'll come to me in a minute. And we wrote new pieces for this project. This was a piece when I was really studying poetic meter, right? Of the Buhur al-Sha'ri, right? The class of the meter of poems of classical Arabic music. And I also was like really thinking about how can I also maintain some real traditions, but modernism in that. And so we'll listen to a little bit of the second movement if you scroll down. Yeah. Al-Kamel, right? The complete. That's the name of that meter. And yeah, you sort of get a sense. So it's for clarinet, violin, viola, and cello.
Okay, let's listen. Beautiful. The meter is really, really interesting.
That's the thing about these classical poetic meters, right? Once you begin to think of them as rhythmic language, right?
Yeah.
Then it kind of forces you into a whole different place, and it's the syllables. The poets would challenge themselves by sticking to this meter and building the syllables, on this whole meter. And so I thought like, what? And it was a book by Mikhail Allawerdi from the 1940s that I came across, that I started reading this, and I thought like, wow, there's something here, but it's really maqam bayati in there, and like I use it in a very traditional way, and it starts and it goes and then it comes back and this kind of a thing. and just tried to give the whole movement a coherence, kind of a structure, but also just emotional as well.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think of the last time I was in Damascus when I hear, and yeah, it's been far too long.
Yeah. Is it, is the sense of longing something that increases or decreases over time?
The sense of longing, I think, has been there ever since we left when I was 13 and came to the US, and that colors, but it changes over time. I don't know I think it ebbs and flows, but, as I go to Europe, right, and I see so many Syrians, I was just having dinner at a restaurant and I met this guy who owns a restaurant and talking to him. And he was just saying, I never thought that my wife and I would ever like travel outside of Syria, like just for pleasure, right? We just had no intention. And then in 2015, he said we were just caught by surprise and we just had to leave, And so when I think about his experience and so many others that I've talked to, mine is just, it's not, so I suppose that I try to channel the feelings that I encounter when I speak to so many displaced Syrians in the past decade or more. And that, in a way, I put myself aside and try to express more of that in different pieces.
Yeah, that's a very relatable feel. We're running over. I want to ask you two quick questions, and maybe they're not quick answers, but I need to ask you, as somebody who works as a composer, which is it's a very hard profession to sustain it. Can I ask you, what does it feel like to get nominated for an Emmy? And I said this in the intro, so I believe it was for the mosque in Morgantown, this was a long time ago, fairly early in your career. So in 2009, you get nominated for an Emmy. How does that feel, and what does that actually do for your life and for your career?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would have been nice to win.
Sure.
But it was, it was exciting. Sure, it's exciting. We went to the awards ceremony, my wife and I, and this kind of a thing. And that's a whole weird thing. And, but I think I was just grateful. I was just grateful, that somebody noticed. And, and then it just becomes, I suppose, I don't want to minimize it, but it just becomes part of, something that you've done. And, but the work is the one that you have at the moment, the thing that you're excited about most, but, I think just gratitude mostly, more than anything else. That's the overwhelming feeling.
Do you ever feel like you're like, but that's not even my best work?
Well, I think for, when I was doing film stuff, that I was very happy with that, so I felt like, okay, somebody, I'm glad they noticed that, but you just don't know. So that, I think that was okay if they're going to nominate something, that one was a good one to do.
Okay. Last question.
I think I know what
you know what it's going to be. I have to ask you.
Okay.
What project was more fun to work on? Working on arranging music for Tina Turner or arranging music for Shakira? And was it fun at all?
Yes. I mean, yes, they were both fun, but it's not purely fun. There's also stress and logistics and that kind of a thing. Tina, I never met her. We had dinner at her home. She was supposed to be there, but she was undergoing treatment. So she just kind of had her chef prepare a meal for us. But we spoke on the phone. With Shakira, I went down to her home studio a couple of times. So just kind of interacted with her, but she was also very, very gracious and smart, really incredible ears, like a real professional, but also, she likes to work late in the evening and then sit down and have dinner and just chat with her and converse, so, I think they were both really just kind of interesting life experiences.
So for Shakira, I'm in Beirut, which means that I'm surrounded by people who are always claiming people as being Lebanese and saying, oh, did you know that, Lionel Messi is actually Lebanese.
Right,
His
right, right.
uncle had a shawarma once in Bush Hamoud, and so
Well, she is actually. I mean, I think it was her father who's Lebanese and her mother's Colombian, and she's keenly aware of that. And when we were talking, she was asking about the history of the Middle East, and I said, look, here are some books you could read, and she got. I know she got those books. I know she read them, and she's just interested. But she's also aware that she's Colombian. And I'll tell you this funny story that I can't remember which time, but the first time we went down there, it turned out we were working on a duet that she was singing with Beyonce called Beautiful Liar.
Yeah.
So I ended up writing the strings arrangement for that. And so the guys who had written the song, I don't know who they were, some Swedish guys or something, but they put in all of this flamenco guitar in it. And she was really annoyed. And she said, I'm not expletive Spanish. I'm Colombian, and so for her, I felt like, yeah, you're right. And it's like, we deal with that all the time, like I'm not, whatever, this or that, this is who I am and this is where I'm from. So she was kind of keenly aware of that. But even her, she had to go with this because she knew this was like this big collaboration with another megastar, and you just roll with that type of thing.
I love it. Shakira, if you're out there, I want to talk to you on Quartertones specifically. But I wonder what it's like working with artists. You always wonder, like, composers who have to write this music and then sort of hand it off to these artists who are going to interpret it. It's written on the page. How does that feel? Where you're just like, all right, go for it when you're not.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's collaborative, and for me, it's exciting when a musician, if I write a piece for a chamber group or whatever. I mean, with orchestras, there's never time, right? Rehearsals are short and it's union and all that stuff. But with chamber group or an album project where you're in a studio, I just love it when a musician says, "Well, what if we do this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's amazing. Let's do that." Because I'm learning a ton by that experience, and then they're bringing their experience to it. That's just, it can be a beautiful thing.
Okay. So on an earlier version of Quartertones, we used to ask this question, which I will ask to you, which if there is a dream collaborator, dead or alive, who would be in this sort of this album? Let's say you're putting together like a dream album, and you can have a whole host of collaborators from any part of the world, any part of the past. They could be living as well, and you can really like put together your ideal roster of performers, writers, artists.
Yeah, you're putting me on the spot.
Yeah.
I wonder if say Darwish and Maurice Ravel, and then bring in Miles Davis if he's willing to come in and work with us, I think, but I would just be there, a fly on the wall, watching, see what happens. I think those kinds of characters who really defined, who made a difference. You know what I mean? In like before them, it was something. After them, it changed.
Yeah.
I think to be part of something like this should be pretty good.
Is there any through line between great performers? Are they all kind of assholes, or is that a total myth?
That's a total myth. That's a
total myth.
I think they're people like everybody else. I mean, I can't speak for those people, the names I just mentioned, but you could always run into somebody having a bad day. But I think the really kind of exceptional performers have a generosity about them that is special. Okay.
Kareem, I'm not going to put you on the spot again, but I would love to hear at some point your 10 must-have albums from and across the Arab world, because you're so informed and so learned on the topic. So at some point I'm going to get this from you and we'll post it on our blog.
Okay.
But Kareem, thank you so much. I highly encourage anybody listening, please go to kr-music.com. There is
kr-music.
The horizontal one, not the diagonal
one. Or just Google my name.
Yeah, there's so much good stuff on the website. It is like a treasure trove. So, Kareem, thanks so much for doing your work, and thanks so much for being on here.
Thank you, Mikey. Really appreciate it. Masalan.